Hey there, hey friends, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice, and welcome back to another Thrifty Review video. Today, friends, we're going to be taking a look at the final watercolor palette that I ordered from the second Temu art haul the last quarter of last year. Now, this is going to be sort of a quick review, overview, and there's not a lot of information to provide. First of all, let me say that the listing for this particular set on Temu is no longer available. And I did find it on AliExpress a couple of days later, and then a few days after that, it was no longer available. So I really cannot tell you right now where to source this palette, but after you hear what I say, you may not be too interested. Anyway, so there is no relevant artist information that came with the set. There is no name, there was no light fast information, transparency information, or pigment information provided. So I was really going into this completely blind playing with these paints. I also add that there are no color names. There was no type of pamphlet or brochure or swatching sheet, anything of that nature that came with this set, like there has in the past with other sets that I've ordered from Temu. Now, you'll notice that this is a 48 quarter pan set, which has been poured, glued down into a generic kind of plastic acrylic see-through palette, and then resold. Now, you will see a lot of this on sites like Temu, sites like AliExpress, also Etsy. Now, what you feel about that ethically is neither here nor there, but it's done, and it's done by a lot of different artists, especially a lot of different content creators and art product reviewers who happen to be reviewing a product in a certain region that's not sold there. So they'll take those tubes and pan them and then sell it in that particular area so that artists will have access to it. Now, you find that happening all over the globe, so it is just kind of par for the course, and you have to kind of go with it. As I said earlier, there are 48 quarter pans, pretty robust colors. So let's just start with the fact that all of the pans were definitely poured from a tube. You could definitely tell that they kind of dried down. Each of them have sort of a sunken feel to them. So that's what led me to believe that. Now, I did not pre-spray this palette any when I was using it. So the paints actually re-wet really well. Now, I'll reiterate, I don't have any pigment information, so I just kind of had to go off feel. First, I noticed that I didn't really sense the presence of a lot of optical brighteners. Some of the paints are very deep in saturation, and you can't really just look at the color and tell what it is in the pan. And that's a characteristic that is normally indicative to like a professional paint, maybe a pure pigment paint. Not to say that these are, just saying that that's a similar quality. But of course, just looking at the paints does not tell you anything really about the quality and their performance. They're all pretty filled to the same level, no issues with that. And as I said, they re-wet really well. So of course, the only thing I could do was jump directly into swatching them. I just named it Temu Watercolor Set, Unknown 48 count. I put down alcohol marker line to test opacity, and I started to swatch. Warm and cool version of all the primaries, several different convenience colors. Now, when I initially swatched them, I noticed that they're all pretty transparent with the exception of the 3 metallics that are included. You get a gold, a silver, and a copper. The black itself is pretty opaque for what it's worth, but everything else seemed to have transparency to it. Now, the very first thing that I noticed, especially when swatching them in mass tone, was that each one of them have sort of a granulation to it. Well, that's what you would call it if it was truly a professional paint. But in this case, I feel like although you can't see the presence of fillers, there are definitely fillers there. I'm not sure if it's a white pigment added to it. I will say that I did not experience any cloudiness on top of any of the pans as I wet them, but there's definitely a little grit. I saved some of the mixtures that I've done with it, and I just wanted to hold that up so that you guys can see Like there's definitely a little gritty texture inside those dried down washes of paint. So to me, that indicates that this is more than likely a student grade set that even if it does have pigments in it, it's stretched. It has other things in it to stretch the paint. Now, going to the pigment thing, outside of the fact that they all have the same little sort of texture to them, there is no different characteristics to the paint. They all seem to perform the same way. Now, they do have a rather good flow to them, which kind of leads me to believe that they're dye heavy, and that dye has been infused onto some type of substrate, chalk, maybe, which is why you'll get the little granulation in it. So all of that was things that I noticed, right off just from swatching the paints. But of course, just looking at them and swatching them is not really still giving you can get a pretty general idea of how they may perform, but you really need to paint with them. So before I jumped into painting, I decided to pull 3 of the primaries out and do some color mixing. The thing is, the colors mix really well. So now I'm thinking to myself, it's definitely either a dye or cosmetic dye pigment, to make up these paints, because they did mix cleanly. However, those secondary colors still have that sort of granular texture to them. Now, this color mixing is done on 100% cotton paper, and they did have a bit of a shift, but not too much of one, simply because of the type of paper that it's on. Now here is swatched on a wood pulp student grade paper, and you see the saturation because I did swatch them in mass tone and then sort of water them down a little bit just so I could get a general idea of the range of color I could possibly get from one paint or one particular quarter pan. So, depending on the paper that you use them on, you're gonna get a better performance. I didn't notice as much grittiness for some reason on the 100% cotton paper versus the actual student grade cellulose paper. So the next thing I did was to do a little flow test. They all kind of flowed and blended together really well. Now there was more of a shift here because I used more water for the blending, but the gold and the copper both stayed pretty opaque, and you can even see the silver right there at the bottom a little bit, but it did blend into the gold. So I don't know, I kind of think the metallics are kind of cool in comparison to the rest of the paints. I did a little lift test here to see how they would lift out. Again, it looks like the metallics actually lift better than the other paints. So it's my thinking that maybe the mica or whatever is in the metallic paints is helping to make it actually a more robust, sort of better paint. Now, if they was to produce a all metallic palette, I think that would be pretty cool. It would be a fun palette, definitely not a fine art professional palette, but I think it would be a really cool, fun palette. And those metallics would work well because they are pretty opaque and they have a nice shimmer to them. But those are actually the stars of the palette, in my opinion, in all honesty. So I mixed a little neutral here. I did notice that even with the reddish earth tones, whenever I mix in with any of the blues that I felt were warmer leaning and would give me more of a cooler gray, there seemed to be green in the mixture of the undertone. And in that aspect, they kind of reminded me of the way Holbein performed. But this is definitely not a Holbein paint, no doubt about that. Nowhere in the ballpark of Holbein. So I did a couple of illustrations with them. One was over in, well, both of them actually were over in Patreon's Creation Station for one of the weekly lives. One of the lives we did a champagne bottle, sort of a New Year's painting, and they did okay. Again, here we have 100% cotton paper, and this is Winsor & Newton. So the running theme is that they definitely perform, using them on a 100% cotton paper gives them their best chance at performing well, without a doubt. But it is very sad that I don't have any artist information to give you. So the paints, if you were to get something like this, could definitely be used for practice. Something in a sketchbook. I definitely wouldn't sell anything I painted with these. I probably wouldn't hang anything that I paint with these either, because I'm just not sure about the formulation of those paints. So the second illustration I did was sort of this colorful landscape, again done in the creation station over on Patreon. We had sort of a landscape tutorial where I gave 5 tips on the way I paint landscapes, sort of break down a reference photo and translate it into actual art. And it was a really fun class. We kind of just painted something that was simple, but had enough complexity to it for me to convey the points that I was trying to make about landscapes. And it turned out okay. Now, this is fluid 140-pound cold press acid-free paper. This is another wood pulp paper. I feel like they actually performed well on that fluid paper. And it could have something to do with the sizing, because I do believe that's a vegan paper. So yeah, they just seem to perform decently on this paper. And I was really surprised, because in all honesty, this is not my favorite paper. But I was able to pull off 2 pretty decent illustrations. Got to do some blending that went well. I can still see a little bit of grit even in the dried illustration. And it's not like, you know, it's definitely not granulation. It just pools together and clumps up a little bit too much to be granulation. So with that said, the paints are only $5 to $6 if I remember correctly, if they ever come back. For right now, they are going to make the Where Are They Now review playlist, because I have no idea where they are. If you've ever used them, do jump in the comment section and let me know. If this palette looks familiar to you, I would love to know if maybe you happen to know what the name of the particular paint is. But I just wanted to do this sort of overview review of this, because I promised you guys I would. This is not something I would necessarily say I recommend. You know, if you're in the market for some fun paints to play around with, maybe you want to buy some paints for the kids. Maybe you're a person who does things like paint parties. So you're looking for something that you can order in mass numbers that will work decently, as long as you have a nice paper. You know, there's an ideal for them. They would probably work decently in a classroom setting, especially for practice, or, you know, beginner watercolor class or something of that nature. So I feel like they definitely could have a use, you know, but definitely not something I would suggest for fine art. This is definitely a fun paint palette if you ever find it. I mean, it looks, I'll let you take a really good look at it. If you ever run across a palette that's in quarter pans that look like this, it may be this palette. I don't know, friends. So there you have that. Hopefully you found, you know, something enjoyable in this review. Please don't forget to sprinkle a little love and give the video a thumbs up if you did. I would really love that shout out, and it'll help the algorithm and help push the video. We are trying to grow the audience to get some more subscribers and some more members over here in the Defiant Art Thrifty Apprentice community, and I would definitely appreciate all of the help I possibly could get from you guys. I don't think that's begging. I think that's just us all working together. You can choose to share the video if you want. It'll do the same thing, help grow and get a bigger audience. Guys, jump in the comment section. Let me know. Again, do you have this palette? If you have, what did you think of it? How did it work out for you? If you happen to know any information, I'll ask again, you know, just tag it in the comment section. If you're new to the channel or returning and you haven't subscribed, please consider hitting that subscription button and notification bell so you'll know when we go live and when we upload here on YouTube. You can check the video description for all of the relevant links. Check out the Defiant Art website. There's a lot of good videos over there outside of a shop that, you know, you can order some of the Defiant Art products that are available. Patreon link is in the video. Palm Street, if you're interested in joining me over on Palm Street, where I will eventually be going live there as well. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me. And remember, as I tell you at the end of every single video, just keep creating.